Hello and welcome to the Metalpack Pod, the industry's leading podcast for the global metal packaging market. The Metalpack Pod is brought to you by the Metal Packager, the number one digital resource for the global metal packaging market. With over 7,000 monthly users in over 150 countries globally, be sure to check us out on metalpackager.com. In today's episode, we welcome Tim Clarke, CEO Europe of Enpack Group. During this episode, Tim guides us through his journey in the can making business and explains the growth of Enpack, which has seen the company recently expanded into Europe. Aside from this, Tim also delves into the importance of smart technology in keeping the metal packaging business relevant in terms of business and manufacturing processes. But before we begin this episode, we must give special mention to our sponsors, PPG. Their range of innovative and sustainable solutions help protect and beautify the world. Now on to today's show. Good morning, Tim. Thanks very much for joining me. Looking forward to an interesting discussion about the latest goings on with your career and obviously exciting developments at Enpack as well. So, no, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Alex. Yes, and good morning to you. Beautiful sunny day in England. So, really looking forward to this podcast.
Absolutely, those have been collector's items at the moment as well, haven't they? So hopefully onwards and upwards, as they say. But no, just before we get started into the nuts and bolts of the conversation, if we could, I suppose, back from the start really and where it all began. So just a little bit of background behind your history and heritage within the industry, and that seems a nice place to begin.
Sure. I started my career actually in the most bizarrest of places. I was going to be a professional golfer. Well, that never happened. And then I got into the world of fashion manufacturing and fashion retailing, and actually joined the world of metal packaging in the sort of early 1990s. I started at a small local plant to me in Sutton in Ashfield, in Nottinghamshire. It's actually the plant where the first DWI food can was produced in Europe. We started supplying pedigree pet foods down in Melton Mowbray with this technology, and that really was a wonderful plant to get to know the metal packaging industry, because we did everything there. We did 2-piece can making, 3-piece can making, end making, printing, coating. So it was a real good introduction to the world of metal packaging, and ultimately that plant was sold on to Impress Metal Packaging in 2006, and then Impress itself was sold to the Ardagh Group in 2010. So during that time I've done a variety of roles, from finance, procurement, operations, commercial, strategic development, and also very proudly I was president and CEO of the North American food business of the Ardagh Group.
Excellent stuff. So that's definitely a varied career within the metal packaging industry. And I suppose one question I like to ask our guests is, we've seen some fundamental changes within the industry with not least some AI and automation, that side of things, which we can go on to in a little bit further down the line. But just your overall take of where the industry is now. I mean, do you prefer things as they are now, or do you prefer I know certainly the industry has become a lot more professional in its approach. It's always been a close-knit industry where once people are in the industry, they tend to stay in the industry. So I'm just interested in your take on how the industry has evolved, and do you prefer things as they are now within the can making sector, or do you sort of almost have a tinge of nostalgia when you speak about the industry?
It's funny you should say that, Alex, that people do tend to stay in the industries for almost a lifetime of a career. I mean, I certainly never intended to stay this long in metal packaging, but I've always had a fascination with manufacturing, to see a raw material come in one side of a factory and to see a finished product go out the other end. And I think that in itself is sort of gets my brain working very well. Going back to my first days within the metal packaging industry, we certainly looked at the DWI food line, and the collective ambition we had was to have a ghost plant. In other words, to have no people in that plant. Now, bearing in mind at that time, we probably had 140 people working on the line. But it was a clear ambition that, you cannot stand still. You have to continually improve what you have. You have to take cost out. You have to become more efficient. And I've certainly seen those efficiency drives continue through my years with Impress and Ardart, and the real acceleration of some of those things. I think what is transitional right now, or transformational in the industry, is really what I've seen at Enpack, and I work for, and they have taken the opportunity to basically consolidate a lot of what they have. They grew by acquisition, and we'll come on to that. But they've taken the opportunity to consolidate production of each individual type of peel-off ends, of beverage can ends and food can ends, effectively into independent factories, and therefore to really optimize the ability to become more efficient. And this really allows for, it's effectively a reduction in investment because you're doing it in one plant rather than several. But it does allow you to really create the environment where a continuous improvement from a much higher starting point really gives the opportunity to have a sustainable and really low cost mentality when it comes to the production of high volume food and beverage can ends.
Do you see where that's the real sort of interesting sort of growth potential within this industry? Then the whole efficiency savings side of things. I know certainly. Not so much to do with the sort of easy open ends market, but the general metal packaging industry, we've seen certainly aggressive growth in the last sort of 3 to 5 years, not least due to sustainability issues, COVID-19, increased consumption within the household. And beginning of 2023, we've kind of seen the industry stall a little bit, and there's been a little bit of concern about sort of the future of the industry, and perhaps when industries do slow down, then it does become more about efficiency savings. So I just wondered your overall take on that side of things, whether this is going to become more and more to the forefront, particularly not least with the global can makers who have to keep an eye on shareholders and share prices and things like that.
The answer to the story overall is that the plastics story hasn't gone away, and it's not going away anytime soon. I mean, particularly in the beverage can world, we've seen a once in a generation seismic shift in demand coming in North America. I mean, to put that into context, the North American market was a total of something like 95 billion cans, and for sort of 10 years prior to 2016 had been remarkably stable throughout that whole period. And what we have seen in the last 5 years is that market has grown from that 95 billion right up to around about 140 billion right now. And that's just unprecedented, that kind of level of growth. And that was fantastic. Everybody's getting a little bit carried away. Everybody was investing, quite rightly so. The growth was there. But then, of course, as you mentioned, the growth has recently stalled. There are a number of driving factors behind that: the war in Ukraine, the high energy costs, the cost of living crisis, and in fact, sometimes it's the lack of availability of beverage cans in some markets as we've been going through this growth. So customers have quite rightly sort of stopped their promotional activity and have been pricing up their products. At the same time, consumers have been struggling with the price of products and food consumption in general. So if you have a family on a limited food budget, you're not going to be able to buy some of the products that are out there at the moment. So I think as we go through the coming years, some of these issues, and we all hope the war in Ukraine stops, but some of these other issues like high energy costs and cost of living crisis will come back to a norm, and we'll start to see a return of the growth that we have seen. Because coming back to the fundamental reason for this growth, it is all about plastics. That story hasn't gone away, is not going away soon. And I think combined with that, promotional activity will start again with the brand owners and with the retailers as well. And we'll see, a period of sustained growth. I've seen various forecasts from the market, reports from can makers themselves in their reporting cycles. I think something like a compound growth of 3 to 4% is quite conservative over the next 10 years. But I think there are so many external factors in play at the moment that's probably realistic.
Yeah, and steady growth is the aim of the game, isn't it? Really, I think, and certainly that 3 to 4% growth year on year is some other industries would be very envious of those targets. And I certainly agree with you with regards to sort of brand owners at the moment. It's been a real case of a once in a lifetime opportunity for brand owners to increase their prices, and once those prices are there, they're not going to revert back to the original sums, are they? So it's it's a really interesting time for the industry, no doubt. We interrupt this episode for a brief segment from our sponsors, PPG.
Packaging coatings from PPG draw on our company's 140-year history of innovation. We never stop improving our solutions to meet the evolving needs of can makers and the marketplace. That spirit of innovation results in technology like the cradle-to-cradle platinum-rated PPG Innovel Pro. PPG Innovel Pro is the latest enhancement to the world's #1 non-BPA beverage can coating. It still doesn't use any bisphenol ingredients, but experienced can makers report that it now sprays like an epoxy. Follow PPG Packaging Coatings on LinkedIn or visit packagingcoatings.com to learn more about why PPG is the coatings partner for can making excellence.
Just moving things on to obviously your latest career path, and I'm just curious to find out the background behind that and your move to Enpack. I mean, there's one school of thought where obviously you've got a lot of passions outside the industry. I thought you might have settled for a few days a week on the golf course, so to speak. So it's interesting to see a new challenge for yourself. So if you could just provide us with a bit of context to begin, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, I guess after we decided that we were going to spin the food business of Vardar into Trivium, that was a good time to sort of go out and do something different for myself. So I'd intended just to do some consulting work just for 6 months, and then to, as my mother used to say, get back and do a proper job. But actually, the consulting work took an interesting route with a couple of very relevant kind of deals with the private equity firms that came onto the market. So I kind of got heavily involved in those, and they were good fun. They were time consuming, but they were very relevant. I had a lot of industry knowledge, so I found I was actually I think I was quite helpful to the private equity guys as they were looking at some of those businesses. And along that journey, I came across Enpack and had some business interactions with them, and I found them to be a fascinating company. I didn't really know them. I kind of knew of them, but didn't really know them. And of course, because of COVID, I couldn't travel to see them, and all the interactions were via video calls. But I found them to be a really upfront, straightforward company to do business with. Now, of course, linguistically, there was always going to be some challenges, but they've got some sort of bright young people in their teams that were able to speak English. And so, we concluded that part of the business very well. And the opportunity came up. They have invested quite heavily in recent years, and they are looking to expand their business into Europe. So they contacted me and asked me if I'd take a look at that and would I help them. And I took some convincing because the golf course has great allures, but particularly when it's sunny. But there are also 6 months in England where it's raining. So I think the reality of that was I quite enjoy working. I quite enjoy the metal packaging industry. And having gotten to know Enpack and the people, I felt this was a good fit. So I decided to join them full time. Started last February. So it's just the start of really hopefully a long journey in which we can look to grow and expand and introduce Enpack into the European market.
You just provide some context behind Enpack as well, and there I know there's been a number of recent acquisitions as well. Just for perhaps for our listeners who aren't perhaps quite as well acquainted, for particularly in the easy open ends market, if you can provide some just a bit of background behind that side of things for Enpack, that'd be great.
Sure. Well, Enpack, it's a business. It's quoted on the Shenzhen Stock Exchange and was quoted on there in 2017, but it really has grown through a series of well-timed acquisitions, and really its ambition was to be a one-stop shop for all kinds of ends, whether that be food can ends, aluminium ends for beverage cans, or peel-off ends. So they have three factories. The one in Yangzhou, which is near Shanghai, is a new factory. It's opened in 2019 and produces beverage can ends. Shantou is a very new factory. It's opened in 2022 and produces food can ends. And Weifang is one of the original plants and produces peel-off ends. So they're the three plants that they have. The acquisitions, I think there were three acquisitions, one for a peel-off end maker, one for a beverage can producer, and the other for easy open ends for dry foods such as nuts and milk and infant formulas. But those have been consolidated into those three factories, and that really is, what they have done. They've invested very heavily in those factories, and I think I saw the corporate video before I joined Enpack, and I've seen corporate videos before, as we all have, and they all look wonderful. And I actually had the chance to visit China about a month ago, the first time really that the markets had opened up post-COVID. And I was absolutely blown away with what I saw, because the reality was that those plants were clean, white floors, white walls, new equipment. They were all laid out in line. They are highly automated. I really didn't see many people around at all. They were safe places to work, well lit, and there was a real buzz about the place. And being in manufacturing for over 30 years, I came away from there thinking, my goodness, I've really seen something now that I could only dream of introducing in Europe and perhaps even in North America. To put it into context, I think in my experience in Europe, we had 4 or 5 plants where we made food can easy open ends. Enpack have taken and consolidated that production under one roof and laid those lines out in such a way that they can optimize the automation investment, they can optimize material movement, they can improve their OEE performance, they can improve their efficiency, and take advantage of all the sort of local economic conditions that exist in China. And I think that really, for me, has sort of cemented my decision to move to work for Enpack, because I truly believe they have taken a giant leap forward, and have provided a new foundation for the future.
Absolutely, and sometimes there is an unfair generalization with Chinese companies as well about cheap, poor quality, and by the sounds of it, with Enpack, that is not necessarily bucking the trend, but they are sort of have the first and foremost is about quality and providing ultimately a good service and product for its customers.
Exactly, Alex. I think I went along expecting to see a factory, with a couple of hundred people also doing lots of manual operations. What I saw was quite the opposite. I saw very, very few people. The ones I saw tended to be engineers, and China has a lot of good qualified engineers coming out of the educational system. China does invest a huge amount of money into this sort of STEM arena for education, and a lot of those engineers now are coming into manufacturing with new ideas, with ideas of how to use AI, how to use systems platforms, how to really go beyond manufacturing 4.0. So a lot of the new design of the factories has come out of a lot of the work has come from Mr. Weng Weiwu, who's the chairman of Enpack. He had the bold vision to invest in plants, but he also was smart in terms of it recruiting the right people to come along to design the lines, to lay them out, and to get smart engineers actually continually looking to improve how they can manage the lines. It's fantastic to think that they're trying to create this ghost plant that I had this vision of over 30 years ago. And I think everybody is still on that journey, but I have seen this time when I visited China a huge leap forward in achieving that ambition. So I think, to your point, it has changed my biased perspective, what I expected to see, and I saw a really modern, safe, highly efficient, highly productive 2 plants that I went to see in Yangzhou and Shantou.
And yeah, and certainly my research as well, it sounds like Enpack are using on the equipment supply side of things some of the market leaders such as Minster for its conversion presses, etc. So yeah, if you want to be the best, you've got to use the best, I suppose.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a little bit like a Slack showroom in the Chanteau plant with all the Slack lines laid out. But yes, you've got Minster, Ferrum, Sudronic all laid out there. Very impressive. I mean, we can all buy that equipment. The market can buy that equipment, but it's how you install it. It's how you lay it out, how you link those machines to the raw material input. The warehousing in Chanteau and in Yangzhou was most impressive. I describe it when asked about it, I describe it as being like an Amazon warehouse where you have the very tall bays with simple automation of the robots going up and fetching and delivering pallets of product with no human interaction. It was quite amusing that on the walk around the plant, there was so much automation, except for the last 20 feet where basically containers were loaded by forklift trucks. So I naively asked the question, why couldn't we automate this final piece? And the answer was that not all containers are the same size and height. And when they come in on different types of trucks, you couldn't automate that part of the process. And that was quite fascinating because I think back to my days of can making where we worked so hard on that final piece where we delivered cans on pallets onto a truck, automatically. That highly automated factory couldn't do it because of container size. So it was a fascinating discussion.
Absolutely. I just want to take things one step back before we move on to the AI automation side of things, which sounds particularly fascinating and very pertinent to the industry at the moment. But just with regards to Enpack and sort of move into the European market, I suppose your role is to give the more of a westernized approach to the company as well, and also there must be opportunities to expand into Europe and further afield as well.
Yeah, we currently have plants capacity at our plants in China. I mean, that's clear. The recent investments have been good, but we've certainly invested in capacity, and that's number one. That's opportunistic to allow us to go out and sell more capacity. We take advantage of the automation and the local economic conditions to give us a very cost-efficient way of producing both high quality and competitive components for the food and beverage markets. I mean, it's not out of the question that we may one day expand our manufacturing operations into Europe. I think there's a reality to some of that shipping distance. The supply chain from China through to Europe is there. But like we saw this week, you only need one ship to get stuck in the Suez Canal. And then suddenly questions start to get asked. And as we've seen through COVID, supply chains have been under stress because of the distances. And I think there's a fresh look at supply chains to see how they can be better utilized to make sure that there are no risks to the supply chain. So I think there's probably at this stage the need to put some kind of probably warehousing in place to allow us to ship and still have safety stock in place for European customers. In a perfect world where the supply chain is purely optimized, we wouldn't need that. But in the real world where ships get stuck on the Suez Canal, that kind of forces those decisions and those considerations. So, part of that could be that we actually put some manufacturing into Europe and we leverage out the engineering knowledge that has been created in China and the experiences that they've had in installing 2 new plants. And could we take and transfer that knowledge base and that manufacturing and engineering philosophy into Europe? I mean, we're a ways away from that yet, but it's certainly something we have discussed, and I think we'll continue to discuss.
I just want to move on to the AI automation side of things. I think that's where there's some real interest for the industry as well. And my features editor Iris was at Enpack and saw your presentation at the event, and one quote of interest which certainly struck a chord with us was so quoting your presentation. So apologies in advance, but it was so you mentioned that we must adapt our business and manufacturing processes to align with digital natives, the younger generation. Sounds good on paper. Certainly, you only have to take a look around at the industry, and it's a very mature market, and certainly it's not necessarily seen as a sexy industry, the metal packaging in the industry, compared to younger people who are certainly interested in tech and gaming and that sort of things these days. So how do we, as an industry, tackle that potential problem and industry brain drain, where certainly some of the international can makers, they've got a large proportion of their workforce potentially retiring in the next 5 to 10 years. So see that as a big challenge. So sorry, there's a few questions there, but yeah, it's quite an interesting topic that we can unlock.
So I guess I have 3 children who are of all that sort of recent graduated age, and I talk to them about manufacturing, and I talk to them about some of the activities that manufacturing involves, and you can see their faces contort and say, no way am I going to do that sort of engineering environment. Now it's a bit dirty, a bit noisy, a bit smelly. And I think, I mean, I'm not saying my kids are the sort of the standard of which all children are to be judged by, but I think there's a reality that, out there, that, my children have been brought up in an era and a generation where the mobile phone is accessible to everything. It contains so much knowledge on there, and using IT platforms to do things for you is far more sensible when it comes to how they would like to live their lives and the things that they would like to do. And I think, one of the things I remember when I first joined the industry, there were so many of the old metal box engineering apprentices that had come through the industry. And that kind of apprenticeship program was fantastic. It gave people a sort of a leap forward into can making. And it gave them a unique knowledge because they had exposure to a multitude of different tasks of different environments, even different countries in which they could sort of learn their trade. And so it was rare for me to come into the industry without having an apprenticeship from Metal Box. And that's something that has stuck with me for a long time. We looked at many ways over the years of having apprenticeships. And I think even I saw in the last couple of years, Ardagh have invested quite a lot of money in North America and in Europe to look at STEM education, to how to get involved with the engineers of the future, so that at one point when they do graduate, they actually take a step into manufacturing, and hopefully, in the case of Ardagh, into their plants as well. And I think that's really good. I think that's a really positive step. I think to reintroduce some kind of direct apprenticeship, particularly as, not every kid is suited going to go to university. Maybe there's a sort of degree type of apprenticeship that could be funded, which actually does get you directly involved in the business. But I think the business itself, as I mentioned, through what Enpack have done, through automation, by using that smart technology to really change the way in which manufacturing is viewed as not being dirty and smelly and noisy, but actually being a modern, clean, efficient plant where robots do a lot of the heavy lifting, and it's the smart people, the humans, that actually do the design of the manufacturing environment to make them safe, to make them productive, and to make them efficient for the future.
Absolutely. I just noted one thing you mentioned just there about old Metal Box's apprenticeship schemes and stuff. They're still doing good work in that front. But from my point of view, though, the world has changed and people don't stick in a job for more than 3 or 4 years, particularly young people. I know that's a generalization again, but compared to certainly my father's generation, where he only ever had 2 jobs in his working life, and a lot of his friends were similar. So there is a danger of committing to the apprenticeship side of things, where you lose talent after 3 or 4 years, and you're starting again. So how do we, as an industry, tackle that particular problem of the modern world and younger people perhaps getting bored and moving on, and the challenge of trying to keep people fresh and engaged?
That is really the generational challenge, and I completely agree with what you're saying. But I don't think I have the answer. I think what we have to do as business leaders is to make the environment that the Gen Z people are coming into, to make it exciting. I mean, can making. How do you make can making exciting? I actually find it really exciting. But I think we as leaders need to present opportunities to people to broaden their careers so they don't have to leave the company to get better experience. I think I go back to something like the old Mars Inc. Corporate program for graduates. They would work 2 years in commercial, 2 years in procurement, 2 years in operations, 2 years in HR. And that would give them a regular reintroduction to the same business, but in a completely different environment. And I think that actually might have been more progressive than I actually realized. And I think something like that could really help people. They would be engaged with the business. They wouldn't have to leave if they liked it, of course, but it would give them a real broad coverage of the whole business, not just in one area. And the old apprenticeship program was probably 5 years in operations, and if you were lucky, you became an assistant manager in 10 years. It was very structured, but you had to sort of serve your time. The Gen Z don't have time to work on that. They want to move around quickly, and they want to do it every couple of years. So I think something like the Mars system might be worth considering for new employees to get them engaged in the business.
Absolutely. No, so that's an interesting take that I hadn't personally thought of myself about, trying to keep people engaged and keeping them moving around to learn those skills, because smart people are smart people regardless of what industry they're in. If you're a switched on person, you can probably make it pay in any manner of industries if you put your mind to it. So no, I certainly agree with that side of things. I mean, one thing we mentioned earlier on this podcast as well was that you said about the fact of trying to get the best talent, and but what about having to try and actually get people from other industries, because that is something that we have to be mindful of, is that people have been in the industry for 20, 30, 40 years. Sometimes you can be a little bit too linear in your approach. So how do we as an industry try and get the best talent regardless of the industry, and trying to make it an attractive industry to be a part of?
I think the areas that we had looked at when we were recruiting 30 years ago is that we would bring in tradesmen into our business. That was our way of differentiating. So different tradesmen, whether they be electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, bricklayers, plasterers, carpenters, but people who had the ability to solve problems with their hands and their brain. I think that was our sort of initial way of making that differentiation. I think in more recent years, certainly in the areas that I've worked, in the geographies I've worked, there have been the opportunities to pull people in from, say, the automotive industry. And they have also brought with them, a lot of the disciplines that the automotive industry brings along with it, whether it be some of the Japanese culturing, the Kaizen approaches to things, problem solving, the project management. Those are really unique skills. I think where the sort of next generation of future employees comes from is getting them fresh from university and creating an environment where they can learn, they can expand their profile, their role. They can also, be prepared to move people around, not just have them in one location. Think of moving them either within a country, within a continent, or even worldwide if you have the ability to do that, so that their horizons are broadened. And they don't leave the business. And I think over time, that experience will pay dividends. I think having people in the business who know the business is so important. It's fine bringing in a lot of smart people from consultancy firms, but if you don't know the business inside out, you can miss things. You can bring a lot to the table, but you can miss some of the fundamentals. And I think that's really important, that you have some continuity, which gives you that depth of experience, which I think in the can making world is really important. I think that there are so many things that recur in terms of whether they be operational problems or supply chain issues or whatever, that having that experience of how to solve those problems can be really beneficial.
Absolutely. Do we sometimes overestimate ourselves within the industry, saying that about how it's such a unique, precise industry, very conservative? And I know you only have to go to a two-piece bev can plant, and you're looking at 2,500, 3,000 cans a minute, and it's talk about the ambivalence to change. But do we sort of over-egg that a little bit about being able to bring in people from other industries, that is perhaps we overrate the the expertise needed in this industry, and that because of the new modern forms of technology and AI, etc., that these sort of technologies are transferable from other industries?
How I view it is that if you bring somebody in, a smart person in from another industry, the last thing you want to do is to teach them how to make cans or how the can making industry does it. I think the secret is to let them tell you what they think is possible, because you don't know what you don't know. And the can making industry is unique, as many industries are. But I think the opportunity to open your eyes to learn and to listen about what is possible and different ways of doing things, that's the thing that will allow the industry to grow and expand. I think for so many years, certainly when I first came into the industry, it was a kind of a can maker's playbook I was presented with in the first year. This is how it's done. I can remember having some good ideas, and I was very quickly shut down. And I remember many years ago, I worked in the fashion world, and the buyers were buying for the spring, the summer, the autumn, and the winter range. And at the end of each quarter, there would be a big sale to be had because they'd overbought or bought the wrong things. So I just kind of said, well, why don't we just buy the month and see what sells, and adapt our manufacturing to that kind of demand and what works and what doesn't. And I was shouted down because I didn't have enough retailing experience. Lo and behold, many years later, that became the Zara model. And the business I used to work for in fashion retailing went bust. So, I think we as a can making industry have to embrace new ideas. Yes, we have a playbook for sure, but how can we improve that playbook and be open to the new ideas, even as crazy as they might seem, but to open our minds to the possibility that there's something better out there that we can do better to make all our lives, improve all our lives.
Absolutely, that's very true. There's nothing more dangerous than the words. That's how we've always done things. Because if you're standing, I think it was Tiger Woods. Again, sorry for the golf reference, everyone. We were talking about that too much on the call, but it was. I think he coined the phrase: "If you're not trying to get better, you're getting worse." And I think that's very, very true. Not least within this business. And just my final thought before we sort of wrap things up. And it seems like you've still got a lot of optimism for the industry, and which is really refreshing to hear. But with regards to sort of AI and automation tech, this industry, I think we can be a little bit sort of outsiders looking in for it, because all we talk about is metal packaging, can making. But in your humble opinion, where are we in regards to other industries about it adapting these modern forms of communication technology? Are we behind the curve, or are we getting there? I'll just be interested to see what your opinion is on that.
For sure, it is relatively speaking an old industry, and as you mentioned as well earlier, a lot of the companies that operate in this industry have shareholders who have in recent years have been very much focused on growth. And therefore, a lot of the investment has gone on capacity expansion. Taking a step back, if you really want to make a huge difference, you really need to think slightly differently. Now, do shareholders allow you to do that? Do you have a sufficient capital budget to allow you to really rethink your operations? It's very difficult, because you have this sort of longer term vision of what you'd like to achieve versus the shorter term investment cycle or investor cycle that has so many demands, which affect stock price, affect your bonus, which affects shareholder returns. And I think the challenge is to find and strike that happy medium of really taking the opportunity when you can to take advantage of what your vision is, but to start off really having a clear strategic vision from your operations, to make sure that when you have the opportunity to invest in some kind of AI, some kind of automation, using systems or cloud platforms to improve the way that you do things, I think they're the they're the things that we need to embrace. I mean, at the recent Enpack exhibition, I sort of wandered around and listened to one or two suppliers who have some fantastic ideas of how they believe their machine works better because it connects to the existing SAP system. It tells the machine tells the operator when it needs to be maintained, the oil levels on that machine or any other maintenance or mechanical issue. They're the kind of things that you need to embrace. Work with suppliers, expand your horizons, work in collaboration with some of these suppliers. Don't try and do it all yourself. There are so many good ideas out there. They don't have to be invented under one roof. I think the future is about collaboration. The future is about having inspiration from others to really create something for the future. It doesn't have to be all your own ideas. It can be done with the help of others.
Absolutely. No, they sound wise words, and having this conversation, it sounds like Enpack are in safe hands for the future and their expansion into European territory and beyond. So no, I appreciate your time, Tim, and it's been a really interesting conversation. So no, thanks very much.
Thanks, Alex. Have a good day.